Hello and welcome everybody. It's Al here. We're going to do our M21 limited set review. Hope to get through it kind of quickly here because these can take a while. We're going to do it a bit differently this time and start with the colorless and lands. We want to see what the fixing is going to look like, what the mana bases are going to look like. So I've got a spoiler up here, and right away we can see, I'm just going to pass by this rare real quick. We can see that we've got the cycle of 10 gain lands, as we call them. These dual lands that come into play tapped and tap for one of two colors. They're at common, which is pretty good. So that's nice. And we always take these around like a C or a C+. Generally speaking, unless the format's really going towards like a monocolored situation or you know, really streamlined sort of one color with just like a handful of a second color kind of decks, you want to take these at least at the level of a C. You would take these sort of what we call like above replacement level, where like if a card like a 2-mana 2/2 that your deck doesn't really need, for example, you might speculate on one of these lands even if it's not exactly in your colors. Maybe it's one color, you don't know what your second color is going to be yet, or maybe you're going to try and splash a third at some point. These lands can be really, really handy. So we're going to start all of these dual lands at a C, I think. And I'll go into my reasoning for that in just a second, rather than C+, but they could be C+ as well. We've also got the temples, but only 5 of them. Only the enemy colored. We've got red, blue, black, green, green, blue, white, black, and red, white. So not all 10 temples are represented, but of course those are rare. So you're going to see them fairly infrequently. And I would also take those at around a C. And aside from that, we've got Fabled Passage, which is excellent. And I think this one you'd want to take at a C+, just because it can enable a 3-color deck. But other than that, there's no Evolving Wilds to go fetch any land. I've skimmed over the green. There's not great searching for lands in green or great fixing there. So I think that 3-color decks are not going to be very common. Even 2 with a splash is going to be a little bit tough to pull off, I would think, which is why you do kind of want to pick these lands up a little bit higher than you might think. But I'm kind of thinking that there's not going to be much, more than 2-color decks going around most of the time. So I'm going to start these at C. In a format where you want to play 3 colors most of the time, these lands are going to be extremely valuable. But when most of the time your deck is going to be a 2-color deck, you only really need like 1 Bloodfell Caves if you're playing red-black. You don't need 3 of these, even 2 sometimes is pushing it if you're playing an aggressive deck, because the land coming into play tapped can really hurt your tempo if you're trying to play a lot of early 1-mana, 2-mana, 3-mana plays. So we're going to start the temples and the gain lands at C and Fabled Passage at C+. And then let's have a look at Animal Sanctuary here. Taps for a colorless, which is a cost. Again, if you're in 3 colors, you would really not want to play a land that doesn't tap for any color of mana at all. But if you're in a 2-color deck, you can sometimes afford to play this as maybe your 18th land or your 17th land if your deck is fairly low curve. So the question is, how many birds, cats, dogs, goats, oxes, or snakes are there in the set? There's 5 in white, 3 or 4 in red, and a couple in green. So if you're in any of those Naya, sort of as we would call the shard, the Naya shard, red, white, and green. If you're in any of those, combination of those colors, then this land might be pretty good for you. So just keep an eye on, obviously, how many creatures of those types you have. You'd want to have, I would say, like 6 or 7 of these creature types before you're pretty happy with this land, I think. And it is costing you 2, plus you have to tap this land. So that's 3 of your lands in play to use it. So I think it's a C, and you're going to not include it often enough because you're not going to have enough of the respective creature types to make it work. So we're going to give that guy Animal Sanctuary. We're going to give that a C. And all the gain lands are getting C's, and the temple's getting C's, and Fabled Passage is getting a C+. Radiant Fountain is the next land we have here. Colorless land, again, it doesn't tap for colored mana, so beware of including too many of these in your deck, as it is a real cost to pay, especially if you're trying to do something like play 3 colors. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So, looks like you're only going to want this in the black-white life gain deck, which we're going to get to in a second. Again, you don't want to play too many of these. Maybe play 1 if I had a black-white dual land, so I knew my mana was going to be okay. Like I'm playing, 17 lands, so one dual land, and then maybe like 1 Radiant Fountain, and a even-ish split of swamps and plains. That would work okay. But yeah, be careful with Radiant Fountain. I'm going to give it a D. I suspect I won't play this card almost ever. But if you are in the black-white deck and your mana base is looking okay and you don't have too many double-pipped cards in your pool, then yeah, you could play a Radiant Fountain for sure. I think people are going to play this more often than they should. So I'm going to give it a D. And I think that's going to do it for land. So let's pop over to Colourless. We'll go to the artifacts, I guess, first. All right. Chromatic Orrery. Legendary artifact, 7 mana, mythic rare. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. And it taps for 5 colorless mana. So it's in play, so it's 5 mana each of any color. Essentially, it just turns the mana costs of all the cards in your hand to 7 or 5 or whatever their total mana cost would be. So that's kind of cool, I guess. And then 5 and tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. So, I mean, that 5 and tap is likely going to get you 2 cards. And then being able to tap it for 5, I mean, as soon as you play it, you can tap it for 5 mana and then cast another spell. So that's not too bad. But you do have to get to 7. And it doesn't really do anything on its own. It can't activate itself. You need 5 mana, and then you have to tap it. So, and it's also a mythic rare. We're not going to see it very often, but I suspect if you do see it, you're not going to be very interested in playing it unless you've got a lot of mana ramp. And I think there is some colorless ramp. So there might be a deck there, but this is not a card that I would start my draft hoping to build around. I don't think it'd be the kind of card where that somebody would pass it to me like 6th pick, and I've got like a couple of Palladium mirrors already, and I'm thinking, all right, maybe I give this a shot. I'm gonna give this a D for now. There's just too much going on here to really, I don't know, assume it's good, but I'd be interested in trying it if I have ways to make a bunch of colorless mana. Next card is Chrome Replicator. This is a 5-cost artifact creature, 4/4. When it comes into play, if you control 2 or more non-land, non-token permanents with the same name as one another, create a 4/4 colorless construct artifact creature token. So 5 mana, 4/4. If you have 2, it's probably going to be creatures. If you control 2 creatures with the same name, you get a second 4/4, which is absurdly good. So this is going to be a card where, you're checking how many duplicates do I have. But this isn't as good as Pattern Matcher from M20, which I think was the 4-mana 3/3. You could search for a card in your library with the same name as something you already had. So you've got one of your, creatures of the same name in play. You cast Pattern Matcher, you go get another one from your deck. That's really good. This requires you to have 2 in play already. And in order to have 2 of something in play, you probably need like 4 of it in your deck, maybe 5 to reliably have 2 in play. Now, the baseline of this card isn't too bad, 5 mana, 4/4. But that's not very exciting either. So I think I'd be looking to pick this up once I had 3 of the same card. Now, if you have these in multiples, that's pretty good too. If you have 2 Chrome replicators and the first one's already in play, you play the second one, you get the 4/4 out of the deal. But then you're playing 2 5-drops in your deck that don't do a heck of a lot on their own. So this is kind of an interesting card. It'll be cool to see if this ends up being really strong or not. I'm going to call it a build around. And if you have 3 or more of the same named creature in your deck, then I think this could be pretty cool. It'll probably be at its best, I'm guessing, in like a red-white kind of go wide, low to the ground, plays lots of 2-drops kind of deck, where you just end up with like 3 Alpine Hounds or something, and this card could maybe do some work for you. But all right, let's move on to Epitaph Golem is next. 5 mana for a 3/5 artifact creature golem at uncommon. The activated ability, 2 colorless mana. Put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So that effect is not going to matter a whole lot in this set, I would expect. It will save you from mill strategies, albeit kind of slowly. If your opponent's got like the Teferi's Tutelage that mills you for 2 every turn, eventually you're going to have to be sinking 4 to 6 mana into this card every turn to not be dead to that. But I suppose you could side it in against that sort of strategy. The body's not bad, 5 mana 3/5, but you're going to have better things to do at 5 mana, I would suspect. So I'm going to give this a D+, but you could certainly side it in versus a mill strategy. Chat saying it allows you to draw your best removal spell every turn. That's true. I mean, once you're almost decked out, yeah, you could just start putting back the same 3 removal spells or good creatures or whatever. So you're always going to be drawing action towards the end of the game if you're really down to the wire. I still suspect this is either a sideboard card most of the time, or maybe there's some kind of cool self-mill build-around thing we can do with it. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm gonna give it a D for now. I mean, you could play it. It's got stats, but I don't think we're gonna be interested in it most of the time. Next card is Forgotten Sentinel. This is a 4 mana 4/3 artifact creature golem. Enters the battlefield tapped. Ooh, don't love that. 3 toughness is not going to be great either. There is a common 3 damage removal spell for 2 mana in red, and there's Grasp of Darkness, -4 toughness in black at common for 2 mana. So 3 toughness is especially a little bit vulnerable in this set. I mean, you could play this card. It comes into play tapped is pretty bad, though. You want your creatures to be able to block the turn they come down. So again, I would suspect that this card is not very good. I'm going to give it a D until we see something that would make me think otherwise. Next card is Maze Mind Tomb. This is a 2 mana artifact at rare. Oh yeah, this one's kind of interesting. I read this one the other night. It taps to put a page counter on itself, and you get to scry 1. Or you can pay 2 and tap it to put a page counter on it and draw a card. And then it says when there are 4 or more page counters on Maze Mind Tomb, exile it. If you do, you gain 4 life. So it's a bit of a dirtily card. It doesn't do a heck of a lot, but let's play it out in our heads a bit here. So you pay 2 mana to play it, does nothing. Oh, well, it scries, I guess, that turn. You would pay 2, cast it, and scry. Or if it's super late in the game, you pay 2, cast it, pay 2 again, and draw a card right away. So pretty slow, pretty unimpactful. By the time you get your second card off of it, you've spent 6 mana. Third card, you've spent 8 mana, albeit over several turns. And then you gain 4 life when it goes down, which does help to sort of recoup the life that you've lost. So I think I like this card, but it's a little bit slow, and it doesn't affect the board in a meaningful way. And I think that this set is going to play to the board pretty well, and decks are going to be pretty proactive. So unless you have a blue-based control strategy, or maybe like maybe a black-green or a black-white or something that's trying to sort of stabilize the board and kind of lock things down, make it hard for your opponent to get through. That's when you're going to want this card. It's pretty bad, and I would expect in like blue-white, white-red, or black-red, the more aggressive-looking strategies. I would suspect that this card is not the best if you're looking to attack your opponent and get them dead quickly. You don't want to be investing a bunch of time and mana into scrying and drawing cards and gaining life. So, this card fits into a more controlling strategy. It's colorless, which is a huge advantage, which means you could take it early and not commit to your colors. And it feels a little bit like that card Bag of Holding, which ended up not being that great, but looked like a windmill slam first pick every time. This kind of reminds me a little bit of that from, I think that was from M19. Did a similar thing. You could invest mana into putting cards in it and then sacrifice it and put those cards into your hand. So I'm going to start this one at C+. Might be a little bit low, but maybe I'm just sort of PTSD from Ikoria, but you want to be playing to the board and having a proactive strategy, in my opinion, as of late in Limited at least. So there we go. Next card is Meteorite. 5 mana artifact at uncommon. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target. So 5 mana to shock something. Not very good. But it has another ability. It taps to add a mana of any color. So here's a little bit of fixing for you. If you're looking to splash a third color, you could put a Meteorite or 2 in your deck. You get to sort of take care of one of their little guys and splash a more powerful card. So I'd be looking to play this card in, again, a more controlling deck. A deck that's maybe mana base is a little bit strained. Maybe you're trying to play a 3-color card, or you're trying to splash black for a little bit of removal, or red for a little bit of removal, and your main colors are like blue and something else, for example. I could see playing Meteorite. I'm gonna give it a C. I think more often than not, it's not going to make the deck. But if there's a lot of X2s, a lot of creatures with 2 toughness, it will get a little bit better. So we'll keep an eye on that. Next card is Palladium Mirror. This is a 3 mana 2/2 artifact creature, an uncommon, and it taps to add 2 colorless mana. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier with Chromatic Orrery. If you have a lot of artifacts in your deck, like Meteorite gets a lot better when you can cast it on, turn 4 off of this mirror, plus maybe cast another spell or something like that. And if you're accelerating to your Epitaph Golem, that's a lot better. Likewise for Chrome Replicator, of course, Chromatic Orrery. So there's a deck here with just, Palladium Mirrors and artifact creatures, but everything's uncommon, so it's going to be hard to get these cards, I would suspect, but could be a nice little outside sort of counter draft strategy if everybody's on, black-red's the best deck, or green-blue's the best deck, and people are leaving these cards to, next to last pick. You could pick up a few Palladium Mirrors and accelerate yourself. Could be kind of good. But, I don't know. I'm on C. Maybe it's even worse than that. 3 mana 2/2 is quite bad, so unless you're using the mana to do something exciting, then I'm not super interested in it. And because it doesn't fix your mana with the 2 colorless, it's a little bit less valuable than something like, Llanowar Visionary that taps for actual green. So then you could go ahead and tap, play a double green spell if you only had a single forest in play, for example. So started at C. I think it might be C-, but if you're in a deck with like a bunch of cards that cost like 5 and another color, or 4 and 2 of another color, you got a lot of 6 drops or something, this card can get you there. So it's sort of going to depend on what you've got in your deck. Next card is Prismite. This is a 2 mana 2/1 artifact creature at common with the activated ability 2 to add 1 mana of any color. This card is not good. I would only play this card in a very aggressive deck that really needed 2 drops. That's where you're going to see this card played, I think. Otherwise, I would not be interested in this. Paying 2 to add a mana of a different color is not very exciting. So I'm going to give it a D. Next card is Short Sword. This is an equipment for 1 mana. At common, equipped creature gets +1/+1, and it costs 1 to equip. So, where do we stand on Short Sword? It's 2 mana before you get anywhere with it. You can get tempoed out if they bounce your creature, destroy your creature at instant speed. I'd be interested in maybe playing one of these flying deck, where my creature's going to be getting through more often than not. And the damage can add up, but this is a really bad card in spots where you don't have any creatures in play and you're really hoping to draw one, or you need a removal spell and you're behind on board. This card is not very good. So yeah, I think this is another D for me. Don't expect to play much Short Sword, but we'll see. I'd be happy to be proven wrong, because I do like kind of little white aggressive decks that play equipment, but +1/+1 is not meaningful enough, I don't think, for me to be excited about it, but we'll see. Next card is Silent Dart. We've seen this one recently in one of the Ravnica sets, guilds, I think. It's a 1 mana artifact at common, and with the activated ability 4 and tap, sacrifice it to deal 3 damage to target creature. So we're paying 5 total mana to deal 3 damage to a creature. Card's not very impressive unless there's a card that cares about you sacrificing things. Then it could get a little bit better. It would have been excellent with Loris in the previous set, where you can repeatedly get it back from your graveyard. But yeah, I don't really think you're going to be looking to pick this up, but you can if you're in a spot where you need removal and you don't have any. It's nice that cards like this are in the set, because you could pick this up for your green deck that doesn't have a lot of removal and at least have an answer to something. So I'm going to give it a D+. Don't expect to play it very often, but maybe. Next card. Ooh, I like this guy a lot. Next card is Sky Scanner. This is a 3 mana 1/1 artifact creature at common with flying. 3 mana 1/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. There's a lot of sort of synergy around drawing cards in this set, so I'm pretty interested in Sky Scanner. It's colorless, which means you can pick it up early, not knowing what colors you're in yet, and it's going to make your deck almost every time. Smooths out your draws. It's a flyer that can poke away at your opponent, or maybe block and trade with one of their flyers. You could slap a Short Sword on it, turn it into a 2/2. This card just does a lot, and it's a bunch better than it looks. So I'm going to start Sky Scanner at... I'm going to give this Sky Scanner a B-. I think you're going to be picking it up pretty early, just because it's colorless. Once you're set in your colors, you'll know whether or not you want a flyer, or your deck cares about drawing extra cards, and you may not want it in a red-white or red-black sort of deck, but in green-blue, green-blue, blue-red, especially are gonna care about this, and blue-white as well for the flying. So, nice card, B-. Next card is Solemn Simulacrum. This is a nice reprint as well. 4 mana 2/2 artifact creature at rare. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it into play tapped, and shuffle your library. And when it dies, you may draw a card. So this card's amazing. You're going to want to take this first pick a good amount of the time. It fixes your mana, so it does allow you to splash some stuff if you want, or even just in a 2-color deck, having that sort of safety blanket of, yeah, I'm going to be able to grab my my second color if I'm a little bit tight on mana is really good. It ramps you, so you're going from 4 mana potentially to 6 on your next turn if you have another land play, and then you can trade it off with something in combat and draw a card. So this is oftentimes a 3-for-1, and it helps you fix, and it's colorless. So I'm gonna say Solemn Simulacrum's gonna be an A- for me. I'm gonna first pick this probably almost every time I see it. It's hard to imagine what else I would take this. What I would take over this, especially because it's in the rare slot, so you're not going to be having to choose between this and another mythic rare or something. So At least on Arena. On MTGO, you might have a foil kind of situation. But all right, next card is Spark Hunter Masticore. 3 mana, 3/4 artifact creature at rare. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card. It has protection from planeswalkers and has 2 activated abilities. 1 mana. You don't have to tap it. You just pay 1. Deals 1 damage to target planeswalker. If you pay 3 mana, it gains indestructible until end of turn. So the planeswalker text is not going to matter very much in limited, although I do enjoy seeing cards that hate on planeswalkers. So what we're looking at here is a 3 mana 3/4 that can gain indestructible, but it does have that additional cost of discarding a card. So, I mean, in a controlling deck, this is going to be pretty good because it can block for you. It's a little above rate, and you're looking to slow down the game, and hopefully that extra card you discarded isn't going to matter a whole lot later. Also, if you're trying to reanimate stuff, it gives you a way to discard things, so that's kind of cool too. But I think in an aggressive deck, you're not going to be as interested in this card because you don't want to be discarding another 3-drop to this or another 2-drop. You want every single card in your hand to hit the board and be able to attack and block. As Fought Foos in chat is saying, 3/4 indestructible is not that board dominant, and I would agree. So it's nice that it's colorless, and I'm definitely going to be curious to try this out. I think it will perform a little bit better in a slower deck. It certainly brick walls the aggressive decks. Like, this is not a card you want to see if you're red-white, because they get to play this on turn 3, and it's going to brick wall most of what you have, and then later it's indestructible, so you could never get through it. So I think this is good in slower decks and is going to perform less well in aggressive decks. So all that being said, what do we give it? It is colorless. You can take it early. I think I'm on B- here. Maybe B, actually. Just because it is colorless. Correction. They're going to play this on turn 3, and you'll swing with your 2/2, and they won't block. Because they can't afford losing to a trick after that. That's true. Yeah. But, I mean, then your aggressive opponent has to be willing to bluff if they don't have anything. And if they do have something, it's a 2-for-2, and they've lost something on board. But, I mean, I guess if they can get through. That's a good point. All right, I'll start at B-. I think you're going to take this fairly highly over a lot of things, but I would not take this over one of the really good uncommons that we're going to get to in a minute, or a good monocolored common like a Scorching Dragonfire or a Aggressive Darkness, for example. Next card is Tormod's Crypt. This is a 0-mana artifact at uncommon. You can tap and sacrifice it to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So this card is probably unplayable in limited, so I'm going to give it an F. Yes, you could side it in against somebody who's trying to reanimate, but then you're playing a card that does nothing, hoping to counter one of their reanimate spells. Because what you would do is they would cast their reanimation spell, targeting their thing in the graveyard, and then response, you would exile their graveyard. So, I mean, that could be all right, but I suspect that even in that situation, you wouldn't want to bring it in. It's too situational. So, let's move on. Just going to... oh, is that it? That's it. All right. That's it for colorless and lands. Oh, there's one more colorless card. All right. Our last colorless card is Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Oh boy. 8 mana, legendary planeswalker, at Mythic Rare, starting loyalty 7. Comes down, you +2 it, so now it's 9. Deals 3 damage. Excuse me. You +2 it, it's now at 9. It deals 3 damage to any target. -X. Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less that's 1 or more colors. So you just get to wipe the board. And you'll probably still have Ugin around at 2 loyalty or 3 loyalty. And -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, put 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. This card is totally busted. The only strike against it is you need to get to 8 mana, but it's colorless, and it's pretty easy to draft a mid-rangey or controlling deck if you start with this early. The only place you're not really going to want it is in a low-to-the-ground aggressive strategy. So if you get past this pack 3, which is unlikely, but if you get past this pack 3 and you're in red-white, go wide, super aggro, then you're not going to want it. But if you see this pick one, pack one, you're going to slam it every time. Chat saying it's good with Palladium Mirror, and it certainly is. Yeah, you'll be taking Palladium Mirror super, super highly if you have an Ugin in your pile. So, yeah, I don't see why this isn't at least an A, if not an A+. So I'm going to give it an A+. I think this card is absurdly good. Just make sure that you have a strategy of how you're going to get to 8 mana and draft towards that. You can't first pick this and then, play an aggro deck and expect this to perform well in it.